Good evening. In next episode of OPOstories from the NBA, our today guest is Greg Kite, former NBA player, a veteran, and two times NBA championship with Boston Celtics. Greg, thank you very much for being a part of OPOstories podcast.
Great to be here, and excited to join you and talk about basketball, NBA, and whatever else comes our way.
So maybe we'll start with the question about before NBA or NBA career. Who was your favorite basketball player when you were a kid, and when was this moment when you decided to play basketball?
Well, I grew up in Houston, Texas, where the Houston Rockets are, and University of Houston. And in fact, when I was young, maybe 8, 9 years old, the Rockets moved to town. I was the youngest of 4 children, 2 older sisters, and a brother who's about 5 years older than me. And he was very interested in sports, football, baseball, basketball, track. And he may have been my first idol. I guess the person I emulated. He was out there playing in our driveway or down at the park with our friends in the neighborhood, and they let me keep score. And then I got to play, and then, but as far as a player to look up to in those days, when I was about 7, 8 years old, Elvin Hayes, who was an NBA All-Star and Hall of Famer, he was a star at the University of Houston, and we got to go to some of those games with my father and my brother, and there were a few on television, and there was a great matchup. I didn't get to go to it, but with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who then went by his birth name, Lou Alcindor, with UCLA and University of Houston, was the largest crowd ever at that time for a basketball game. I think it was about 1968 in the Houston Astrodome. So it was an exciting time for basketball, and my brother played on school teams and a very good team on their church league. And so I wanted to be like him and do the same thing. Play on the school team, like on the high school team, and what we called junior high school. Then so I had my first chance to play basketball as a 10-year-old at a YMCA, and then after that I went on to my school teams and made the teams and progressed. But I would say probably Elvin Hayes was my first kind of basketball idol. But back in those days too, I was big. I knew I was going to be a big guy, tall, and I liked the centers. So Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Wilt Chamberlain and Elvin Hayes and Nate Thurman, who was a great center with the Golden State Warriors. We had some posters. My brother and I had posters of them on our walls in our room.
When I check the NBA history, which are fascinated in this aspect of the it's amazing that Elvin Hayes was one of the greatest centers in the NBA history, but not so famous like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Moses Malone. So for young NBA fans, I think that he's like ghosts from the history that nobody even saw him.
Yes, I think so too, because you think about what happened with the NBA, and Elvin was kind of a center, but he also played more of a big forward. He was a very good jump shooter, and not going out necessarily to 3-point range. They didn't have it then, but a lot of great players in the 1970s, and just even in going back before that, the 50s and 60s, there just wasn't all the coverage that there is now, even not just worldwide, but certainly U.S. Obviously, we didn't have YouTube and social media and clips like that then, but even the NBA, I believe when I was a college player, like 1981, 81, the NBA finals were broadcast tape delayed. Like they played the game that night, and they showed them later at night when the prime time television was over, tape delayed. So the NBA had some great players. They just weren't as well, known. I was certainly, probably in some of the cities where those teams were, and one of Elvin's teams with the then Baltimore Bullets won the NBA championship. but just the exposure was different. And so you got in that era that I got to play in with Larry Bird, Magic Johnson coming on the end of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Julius Erving's careers, and basketball really took off. And then, of course, after Magic and Bird, Michael Jordan came around, and the Dream Team went to Barcelona. And, not only were there pockets of excellent basketball in Europe and a few other places in the world, but I think basketball really exploded in the NBA's marketing arm and reached around the world. So, some of it has to do with age. Certainly there's probably a few young kids who don't even know who Michael Jordan is, but just definitely it's just so much easier to see and watch games and know the stars now. So.
Yes, I remember because I started my journey with NBA in the mid-90s. So there wasn't internet time. It was poster, NBA cards, and so on. And in 80s, it was also different. And your story with NBA started in 1983, and Boston Celtics selected you with 21st pick in the first round. How do you feel when you heard that you are going to Boston and will be part of such a great organization?
It was exciting. I was very, very happy. Obviously, I knew I may get picked somewhere around that time, 21st pick out of 23 at that time in the first round of the draft, or a few picks later in the second round. But things had worked. Obviously, it was going to the Celtics at that time, where a contender with the Philadelphia 76ers and the Lakers and the Bucks. They had won the championship in '81. Larry Bird was there, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, and a college teammate of mine, Danny Ainge, had just finished his second year with the Celtics. So it was great to be able to join them. And so I was very excited. Things worked out perfectly because they'd also, one of the key pieces in our run, they had traded for Dennis Johnson. They traded their Rick Roby, a backup center from the Celtics, shortly before the draft to Phoenix for Dennis Johnson. And so then they needed another backup center. So that opened up the opportunity for me.
And how it was to play with this legendary front court, Bird, Parrish, and McHale. Did they treat you like a rookie, or was it a friendship from the beginning?
Oh, there's always a little bit of a rookie experience with any team in the NBA. That's just part of having fun and also putting a little test to the guys. It wasn't bad, but and I think even the second year we were pretty much rookies again, because it wasn't like there was any new young players the second year, I believe. But the rookies would have to, one thing they have to do on the Celtics was to pass out when we were on the road trips, the practice uniforms. We'd have a bag or a pin with the practice. We'd have to go pick up the dirty ones for the trainer, the equipment manager. And I asked Kevin McHale, I said, Kevin, did you do this when you're a rookie? He said no. He said no. And if they'd wanted a bellman, they would have drafted a bellman. So Kevin had fun with it, but it was great. They were great guys to be teammates with and play with, and great experience for myself. And there was another rookie that year, Carlos Clark, and then other young players that came along in the next few years, Sam Vincent, Rick Carlisle. None of us were Hall of Fame players like those guys, but there were the stars and starters there. But we got to contribute, and we got to learn from, about being a winner and about being professional from those great players and some of the other very experienced veterans that they had on the bench as well. So it was obviously a great competitive team, but a wonderful setting to be with a lot of great guys who were very professional about what they did, competed hard, and loved to win.
It was also very successful rookie season, because you won NBA championship in the first season. What was the most difficult during this season? Of course, besides those rookie tasks which you've got at the beginning, what was the most difficult for you from your perspective?
Probably two things. One would be, when you go from college basketball or high school basketball here in the United States, you may play 30, 35 games. And you go from that to the NBA, where you play 82 regular season games, at that time 8 exhibition games, and then if your team like the Celtics were those first 4 years they played, you're playing going to the NBA Finals, you're playing about another 22 playoff games. So the season is very long, over 100 when you're going to the finals, over 120 games or over 110 games long. And so you don't have a lot of practice time sometimes, but you do have during stretches of the season. But also as a rookie or a young player where you're not playing a lot, that can get a little bit frustrating sometimes. You got all these games happening, but sometimes there's games where you don't play or just a few minutes. And of course, even to be in the NBA, I came from a situation in college and high school where I was a player who played most of the minutes. So everybody has that adjustment. But and in particular, being on a great team like that, teams that are contending for the championship in any year, in any era, it tends to be, for the most part, the young players play minimal role. So just being patient. But I was smart enough, and I was around other good guys who we knew our job was to push the starters in practice and to stay ready, keep ourselves physically ready, because sometimes when you're not playing as much and practicing much in the season, you can lose conditioning. So I worked hard in our outside of practice and before games and things like that to stay ready and to improve my skills.
And how it was?
I would say one other thing that's a big adjustment people don't realize is size differential. Not just that you play against some people who are 7 feet tall or guards who are 6'5" and 6'6" in college, but length, arm length, and just great reach. Because you don't really play basketball with the top of your head. It's kind of irrelevant, but everybody talks about how tall you are in meters or inches and feet, but it's really how long you can reach and how high you can reach. So, all of those guys, like the big guys that are playing against, Kevin McHale, Cedric Maxwell, Robert Parrish, Bill Walton later, and then many of our opponents did very long, very, very hard reach. So that adjustment to that, particularly for me as an inside player, that was a challenge.
Mm-hmm. The size is one thing, as you said, but also I guess that 80s were much more physical than today. And I'm just wonder how it was to play during practice against Larry Bird. Was he so tough and nasty player like for the other teams and other players, or was it nicer for teammates?
Oh, we were competitive in practice, very competitive in practice, and we pushed the team. We called it the green team, the second team, because we had the green and white reversible jerseys. And particularly when Bill Walton came in 86 and 85, 86, 87, we had a lot of fun with that. And these short times or practices where we had a little bit longer time where we were scrimmaging and keeping score, we actually kept wins and losses. Now, you got to realize too that in the NBA you've got a week or so of training camp where there's a lot of live scrimmages and exhibition games during that season. But once you get into the season, you've got 3, 4, 5 games a week. The starters are people are playing 25, 30 minutes plus a game. They're basically recovering, their bodies between those games. So even so that was a little bit of advantage we had, maybe when we're doing a little short scrimmage, they're a little bit worn down, but they were competitors enough that they wanted to win. And Larry might talk a little bit of trash in practice too once in a while, but we had a lot of fun. We were very competitive. And I think that's part of what, helped us. I think it probably helps any team sometimes. And I went on from there to a team that wasn't very good, the Clippers, and it was a whole different atmosphere, sometimes in practice. But that's part of what makes great teams great is not only the players that they have, but how hard they work, how they work outside the games, and how they get along and mesh together.
Mm-hmm. And you play with Celtics from 1983 to 1988. Twice you won NBA championship, 4 times were in NBA finals. And
Yes.
If you could choose the top 3 moments from the time when you were a Celtics player, besides NBA championship, what will be on the list?
The top three moments while I was with the
Yes.
Celtics or in the whole
Yes,
NBA?
when you were a Celtics.
Oh, well, I'd always have to put the championships at the top. I mean, winning a
Yes, that's I know that will
championship
be
as
too
a
easy
team
to answer.
is what it's all about. But just as far as great, fantastic moments or memories, there was the time when Larry Bird and I scored 63 points, actually 100 points in a game in New Orleans against the Hawks. He scored 63 in the game. I scored 37 in warm-ups. And Larry, Kevin McHale, you've probably seen the clips of that. Kevin McHale had set the team scoring record about a week or 10 days before that, 56 points, I think it was. And Larry told Kevin, that's not going to last long. And we went to play the Hawks in New Orleans, and he was just phenomenal. He was just, I mean, he was always great, often great. And so that was just a memorable stretch. I'll point out two other ones just for me personally. Just a small moment. We talked about Elvin Hayes earlier. Elvin Hayes' last year in the NBA was my first year in the NBA, and we played the Houston. He was back with the Houston Rockets at that time. We played the Rockets in Boston, and I was sent in the game, and I happened to guard Elvin for a few minutes. So what a full circle, me as a kind of a childhood hero, and then getting to guard him for a few minutes there in his last year. And then I'd have to say there was a game in the 1987 finals where I got a lot of minutes, 20-something minutes, 24 minutes or something like that, and was a key player in helping us win Game 3 against the Lakers in the 87 finals. And so that was a great highlight and great moment for me while I was with the Celtics.
And how looks those competition and battle between Celtics and Lakers, because it was the cherry on the top in the NBA 80s. How do you remember those rivalry in the NBA finals and also in the regular season?
It was tremendous, and that's I mean, the two franchises have won I think more than half of all the NBA championships in the history of the league. About 38, 39 of them, something like that. And it had this great history going back to the 50s and the 60s. And so to be part of that, just to see the excitement and the vibe between the two teams, I know there's and great rivalries are what makes sports interesting. You've got European football, Manchester United, and who's their rival? I don't know football, soccer that well, or Real Madrid and Barcelona FC, or here in baseball, it's the Yankees and the Red Sox, and or the Dodgers and the Giants, and basketball, the Lakers and the Celtics. That's it. That's a top number one rivalry, and then to have it in that era with Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, along with the other. I mean, both teams had 4 or 5 Hall of Famers, including those guys. So what a magnificent setting. And they just come out of, too, the few years just before they joined the NBA, Larry and Magic had played in the highest rated college basketball game of all time in the NCAA championship in 1979, when Magic's Michigan State team beat Larry's undefeated Indiana State team for the championship. So it was really a magical era and magical time to be part of that, and just so exciting, and to be part of that rivalry as well.
And your story with Celtics finished in February 1988. And did you expect it that Celtics would waive you? And what was the feeling? How do you feel with this situation?
No, I was sad to go, but it was kind of a situation where their hand was kind of forced. One thing that happened, and I didn't know this at the time, but when we went to 4 NBA finals in a row, that was only the second time in the NBA history that a team had done that. Now it's been duplicated since with the Miami Heat, with LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Bosh, and then 5 times in a row with the Golden State Warriors with Steph Thompson and Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and those guys. But what happens, and it seems like this happened to the Warriors too, is that after that much playing in a few years, you kind of break down. So in 1987, 88, or I'm sorry, it's 88, 89 season, when I got waived, we were kind of banged up. We had been banged up the year before, and some of our players like Bird, McHale, and Parrish, and Bill Walton, they were dealing with a lot of Scott Wedman. They were dealing with injuries off and on, and those guys, most of those guys were already in their 30s, mid 30s, early 30s, so they had a lot of years of wear and tear on their body. So the Celtics brought in Artis Gilmore a few weeks before they waived me to have another veteran, big guy, to see if they could help with some of the trouble we had. And then somebody else got healthy, and they put me on the injured list with a sore back, which you've always got something that hurts in the NBA. Could I have played? Probably, but yeah. So my sore back, and I think after a couple of weeks of that, the NBA actually has a function. They may still do it, although things have changed a little bit, where if you're on the injured list after a certain point, other teams could challenge that, and there'd actually be a doctor from the league, independent of the team, that would examine you to see if you were, really worthy of staying on the injured list. So there was kind of some decisions, personnel-wise, that they had to make with that, and I think the Clippers, who I went to, were interested in getting me, even possibly trading for me. But what they did is the Celtics let me go, and I was on waivers, and they claimed me on waivers, which is a little bit different. You go through this waiver period of like 48 hours. If you clear waivers, then you just sign as a new free agent. If they claim you on waivers, they pick up your existing contract. So I had a year and a half left on my contract. So it was sad to leave. I would have loved to have been a Celtic my whole career. They never went back to the finals after that. So maybe that was the curse of the Gregino. Like they went back to the finals eventually with Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen. Those guys have won it. But for me, the upside from it was I went out to the Clippers for a year and a half, then the Charlotte Hornets for a few months. A year later, then the Sacramento Kings for a year. And those 2.5 years were a chance for me. I was on teams that weren't very good, but it was a chance for me to play a lot and to play 20, 25 minutes a game, start a lot of games, and to get better and gain a little more confidence as a player. And so that's the kind of the difficult thing on a contending team for a young player, especially in my role there with a lot of Hall of Fame players in front of me. You're not going to get a lot of playing time, and every game is so important. Whereas with teams that are bad, just like right now, you can go look at the NBA right now. There's a bunch of bad teams at the bottom, and they're playing all their young players. Oklahoma City Thunder's having Al Horford sit out, and the Magic traded away their best players here in Orlando and then waived a pretty good veteran center. They're all, there's some of that race to the bottom. Can they get there? But they're also looking at the future. What are these guys, these guys that we have on a roster now and under contract, or there's somebody
especially at the end of the season.
Yeah. Is there somebody who can develop? And some teams know that from the start of the season. They get a month or two in the season. So that was the upside of going to those other teams. It was a great chance for me to improve as a player.
So in different role and also with championship experience, playing with Hall of Famer front courts, you came to Orlando Magic, and how, from your perspective, was to play in such a young organization, still developing, learning, and compare it to being a part of championship roster? How difficult it was to play for you in the different role in different organization?
Well, my chance to go sign with Orlando in 1990, where I still am, this beautiful blue sky behind me is Orlando, was great because that's where my wife was from, and we actually spent some of our off seasons here. We actually had a home here the year before, right near her parents, and she had younger siblings at home. So family-wise, it was great. We had the young children then, and we could live near her sisters and her mom who could help us out. And I had, in fact, back in the late 80s when it announced that the Magic were going to be one of 4 new NBA franchises, we said, oh, hey, that might be great to play for the Magic one day. So, in actually a lot of ways it was a great fit. Now it was their second year. The year before they'd had some interest in signing me, but I ended up in Sacramento. Magic decided not to sign anybody else that year, but again, it was a continuation for me. Of course, they were an expansion team second year. Weren't very good, but we did actually, that first year I was there, I got to start. I was a starter for all 82 games my first year. The second year I started probably at least half the games when they'd added a couple of rookies who had a lot of potential. Big man, Stanley Roberts and Brian Williams. So again, it was more of that learning experience, and it helped me to, I think, solidify myself. Maybe I'm not a NBA starter on a good team, but I was certainly a rotation player. So, I mean, a rotation player would be a backup big guy, backup center. And so then the third year here, Shaquille O'Neal came along, and for some reason they gave him my starting job and never explained to me why, but I figured it out somehow. But he was, Shaq, of course, we all know his history, and just a incredible physical player with such quickness and strength and power. And so it actually said, hey, this is a pretty good situation. We had some other pretty good young players who were shooters and athletic, and Shaq in the middle. And then I could, I'm 32, 33 or so then. I could maybe, back him up, play a 10 minutes a game or whatever. And that's what I did for the first year. And then the team was getting a lot better. And then the second year he was here, which was my fourth year, the Magic, they picked up Penny Hardaway. And then we were really getting better. And then unfortunately during the middle of that year, I partially tore my Achilles tendon. So that was kind of led to eventually part of what led to me not, ending my days with the Magic. I was with them recovered, and I was with them for the summer until the training through exhibition season of the next year. But it was great to be able to play here for the Magic. It was home for us, and it was a very exciting time in Orlando with the new team and a new team that got very good very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And how it was to play against Shaquille O'Neal during practice, and did you, when Orlando Magic picked him in the NBA draft, did you decide to put more money in your health insurance?
Yes. Shaq played hard and practiced hard, and he got obviously better and better as some of his skills and things as he went along in the year. And he was a competitor, so I wasn't smart enough in games and in practices sometimes to get my head or face out of the way. So I've got a few scars, and I think I got a couple of stitches a couple of times from Shaq's elbow. But Shaq was incredible in that. I mean, he was really an element in any sport that really makes a difference, whether it's track and field, athletics, wrestling, boxing, football, soccer, basketball, is power. A lot of that power comes through your hips and torso. And Shaq was as powerful, meaning he could move with as much force as quickly as about anybody. Plus, when you put that size on him, Charles Barkley was a very powerful player, for example, but Charles is 6'5" or whatever. Yeah, but he still did an awesome job, and he's got long arms. But Shaq was 7'1", fit 320, 325 pounds, could run like crazy, long arms and big hands. So he could go around guys, run past them, go over them. And sometimes when he'd go to the basket, guys hanging on him just like they were an ornament on a Christmas tree. He was pretty phenomenal. They didn't keep it as an official stat, but somebody tracked it in the league. And, he came in the league in those first 4 or 5 years, and probably even longer than that. He was dunking the ball 4.5 to 5 times a game. And just for perspective, before that, any given year, the leader was usually about 1.5 to 2 dunks a game. Larry Nance, who was a slam dunk champion, I think he led the league in dunks the year before Shaq came in, was about 1.8. So that's an amazing stat. If you don't think about it, is all these other 350 players, there's one guy who could get not only the short shots that he made that he didn't dunk it, but could get all the way to the rim and dunk the ball, 2 to 2.5 times more than even the other best players in the league at doing it. So he was just a incredible body. You know, our coach at that time was Matt Gukas when we drafted him, and Matt had played in the NBA, and Matt had played with the Philadelphia Warriors before they moved to California when Wilt Chamberlain was about 27, 28 years old, and kind of filled out. And so Matt Gukas had been around the NBA for over 30 years. He said Wilt Chamberlain was the only physical body type that he could even kind of compare to Shaq in all those years in the NBA. And I'd have to agree too. I mean, you think about that, and who else has there been to compare to since then? Nobody, you know, nobody. So quite a player and quite a personality too. A fun guy.
Uh-huh. And I guess that you are still close to Orlando Magic, but this time as a fan and maybe also as a part of Orlando Magic history and a veteran from our team, even closer to the organization. As Orlando Magic fan, I'm really curious about how could you compare the situation in the early 90s when you came to the team in this before Shaq era to current situation, because we've got talented young players still developing, not so many luck with injuries, but how do you see Orlando Magic now at the end of 2020-21 season?
Oh, well, right now, the last few weeks when they traded away Nick Vukovic and Evan Fournier and Aaron Gordon, they're really, really bad. And there are a few other teams that are really bad. And I mean, last 5 games, they lost by 30 plus points. So,
but when you look at the NBA, the next NBA draft, I think the losing is a good strategy.
Well, yeah, and teams get in a situation where they have to decide. And I think John Hammond and Rick Weltman, not Rick, but Mr. Weltman, who are their basketball lifers, have been around. They've developed the Milwaukee Bucks, Toronto Raptors. They know what they're doing, and I think things changed. You know, they had a foundation where they were getting into the playoffs, maybe an 8 seed, 7 seed, maybe it could get a little bit better. And then they had this incredible string of ACL knee injuries to 3 young players who are very good. Jonathan Isaac, the guard from Markelle Fultz, and then who else did it happen to recently this year? Mo Bamba's there. He's back and hurt, but and then even Cole Anthony, who's a rookie this year, missed a few months. So they've just it's been difficult to have all these injuries. Particularly, I mean, I thought about that one time they had 3 guys with ACLs. I think I'd played in 12 years, and I think I had one teammate who had an ACL injury while I was playing with them in 12 years. So bad luck. So I think they figured and then you got to figure in contracts. They had to free up some money, start over. You know, Fournier was probably not coming back anyway. He was near the end of his contract. I think the toughest one to give up was Vukovic, but he's still even Nick's a great career. You know, he's 30 plus, so they're kind of starting over, and maybe they'll pick up a piece or two of a key component, Mo Bamba, Chuma Oziki, or something like that. Cole Anthony, you're playing with them now. Hopefully those guys will come back okay from their injuries, and then, you know, get a high draft pick, have some money to sign a free agent, and climb back up in a year or two to where they could be in that playoff mix. But that's just kind of the cycle of the NBA. You look at it, you got good teams, you got bad teams, you got kind of sometimes teams that are kind of stuck in between. And even the good teams, the very good teams, sometimes that cycle lasts for about 5 years, you know, 4 or 5 years, and then guys get injured, get old, they leave through free agency, whatever, and they gotta do it again. So hopefully for the fans in Orlando and around the world who like the Magic, and just for the good people that they have in the organization, the coaching staff and the basketball leadership that they have, they're you know, it's not like when you have a bad team in the NBA that you got a bad coach or that you got a bad because they're all great coaches, or that you got a bad staff, or it's just you know, dealing with what you dealt with. You don't control it as much in some ways as you do in say college or at other levels. So it takes time with the personnel to change it over and to get those young players. When you're building around young players, not only do they need individual experience, but collective experience. I mean, you look at the Phoenix Suns, they're a good example, you know. Bad for a few years. They got Devin Booker, they got Ayton and a couple others, and they had a veteran like Chris Paul or whatever, and now they're, you know, so those guys got a year, 2 or 3 of experience, getting a little bit better. At the end of the year, they're playing better last year. They had a great veteran leader, another veteran or 2 off the bench, and they're one of the better teams in the West.
Or maybe you should wait till Chris Paul contracts will expire in the next, I guess, 2 seasons, and then at the end of his time in the NBA, he will come to the Orlando Magic, and there will be good, bright times.
Maybe Chris is one of the best players. I love watching him. He's one of the smartest players and understands the game. And that's the thing. I think, you know, it's all, we see all the 3-pointers made and the slam dunks and things like that. And that's, you know, part of the game. But it's players who can really play the game and understand the game. For kind of a basketball purist, I guess that's what I love to see. It's great having the influence that we've had with a lot of the international players. You know, I think in Europe and other parts of the world, they play a little bit more of passing game, ball movement, and shooting, and it's really it's really been a big part of influence with the NBA, along with the rule changes where they've made it less physical back in the 2000s, along with spreading the floor, and then all the analytics and the shots. There's some good, some bad about it, but I think it's been incredible. I think the influence that international players in international basketball has had upon the NBA.
Yes, situation changed a lot, especially when we compare it to the 90s or late 80s.
Yeah,
where there are
and in stars you get like Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic are 2 of my favorite players watching the NBA, and you know, it's just they come from a different, little bit of different set overseas, where we've got these school teams here, and you've got this travel ball AAU. It's we kind of practice, we kind of play, practice. Over there, they practice, play, practice, play. And I think there's something to it. Plus, we got a little bit of an entitlement system, I think, in some ways here. Some players expect a lot. Not that there aren't great players, and it gets weeded out when you get to NBA. But it's great to have that basketball. That's a global game. The NBA's just opened its NBA Africa League, so good to see those things happen.
There is a motto: once sold, always sold. And you also spent 4 seasons with Orlando Magic and now live in Florida. So when we will look at your basketball heart, would it be green, blue, or mix of both these colors?
I don't know. They were going to say, I thought you were going to ask me when they put me in the Hall of Fame, which jersey will I wear? Well, they're not going to put me in the Hall of Fame. They let me buy a ticket to go through the Hall of Fame. That's my line. I played with some Hall of Famers, but I don't know. I love basketball. I think being hometown here in Orlando, I always have a special place in the heart for them and follow them. But you can't beat being with the Celtics and that tradition, and the Celtics organization still treats us royally and keeps in touch with us if we're ever in town. It's, hey, come by a practice, come by a game, and not that other teams don't do that a little bit, but nothing beats being a champion. You know, those are memorable years, and being in those part of those NBA championship teams in that era was definitely the highlight of my career. I mean, but playing basketball for a living, playing as a kid, I never retired from the NBA. They just got tired of me. So, and I think that's the way a lot of guys who love the game are. So being able to play anywhere, but certainly Orlando, and so maybe my heart's a little bit green, a little bit blue.
So the mix. When you look in the past from current perspective, how could you describe your NBA career?
When I look at the past from current perspective, well, I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Like I said, I wish I could have even played a little bit longer. I got to play till I was about 35. I was getting a few injuries and health things that, besides being 35, that didn't make teams really excited to have me anymore. But I'm blessed and fortunate to play as long as I did. Still receive a lot of benefits and blessings from doing that in my life. As far as my career, I was a champion, an NBA champion. You can't ever deny that. I think people sometimes who, look back, or maybe people who saw me play say, well, I wasn't that skilled, or wasn't that, didn't do that well statistically. But I wish there were some things that I knew now, and some things that I could help myself with, maybe could have helped me perform a little bit better. I was always a very anxious as a player sometimes, especially on offense, and learning how to calm myself down or slow myself down. And that was a trait that I kind of had off the floor too. So it wasn't like it was something just basketball. But so I wish I could have performed a little bit better, in some areas. But on the other hand, one of the things that, like I said, I mean, everybody knows and pays attention to what happens with the ball in basketball. But I always tell young people that I coach and talk to, I said, if it was all shared equally, you'd only have the ball 10% of the time in the game. And guess what? It's not shared equally. So you might have it 2% of the time or whatever. So what do you do when you don't have the ball? Half the time you're on defense. How good of a defensive player are you? So I think I was, a very solid defensive player. And then even things on offense that weren't necessarily big statistical things. I was an okay rebounder, good rebounder, but I think setting screens, being able to move without the ball, occupy my man. So I think it did very, very well. Now, those things don't register on the excitement scale, but they're part of what, being able to do that and being able to be a smart player and a good worker and things like that are things that kept me in the league for 12 years. So I'm happy I was able to do that, and it's great to be able to. It was great to be able to play. I wish I still could a little bit. It's hard walking now without a limp, but even for that playing Jones for about 13, 14 years after that, I still played some competitive senior basketball, masters basketball, and had fun doing that. But then the knees and the weight got in the way.
I see that Florida and Orlando as well is a really popular destination for former NBA basketball player. So I guess that if there will be an idea to create some kind of veteran Big Three league in Orlando or in Florida, there will be a lot of potential players who would like to be on the court again.
There could be. There's a lot in South Florida too, Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. But beautiful weather attracts a lot of people, no matter what their profession was. We don't have any state income tax here, so it's a little bit a lower tax rate. So a lot of those things attract people to Florida. But like I said, I did play in some of these Masters basketball tournaments, and one of them was in Fort Lauderdale once a year. It was a lot of fun. Mostly ex-college players. Some had played professionally in the States and overseas, and some other guys who were just good players in school and kept playing. But Jim Barnett, who was a play announcer for the Golden State Warriors, was playing. He was older, and he was 10 or 15 years older. And I said, Jim, how come there's not any NBA guys playing in your 60 and over division or 65 and over? He said, too many of them already have a knee replacement or a hip replacement. So that would be the holdback, I think, of the veteran league. Some of the young guys I know who are not far out of the league in their 30s and 40s and maybe sometimes in their early 50s still do play on some money ball competitions, the tournament in the summer. They go on some foreign tours. So that kind of stuff happens, but it's a game that takes a toll on you physically, over time. Mm-hmm. You may not notice it then, but it's hard to keep that up too long, Pickleball. Playing pickleball or playing golf or bowling or something like that, is what you get after 50 or 55. So shooting free throws, I can do that.
Or horse play. Greg,
yes.
Thank you very much for being a guest in OPOstories from the NBA. It was really nice to hear your stories from the Boston Celtics time, Orlando Magic. And I hope that our Orlando Magic will soon be maybe not at the top of the top, but fighting for the playoffs. That young players will develop. And we will see. Hope in the next 2 or 3 seasons.